Hey, good morning, and welcome to Getting Started. It is Tuesday, and I thought we were in spring, and here we go. A little bit more cloud and rain last night. That's all right, we're all good. So this week we're working on just kind of a wrap up for the month of March. And I thought, as I talked about yesterday on the podcast, I thought that one of the most important things that we could talk about as we get ready to wrap up for the month is one of the things that can really get in our way in creating the financial life that we desire in any aspect, however you define that. And that's this issue of procrastination. Procrastinate, to put things off. It's not really about putting things off as much as it is that it's a sign of maybe something else that we should be maybe looking at or paying attention to. And then what happens is that it starts this snowball, right? And then the snowball starts getting big, and pretty soon the snowball is big enough to consume us, right? And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds and add another aspect, like I promised yesterday, to procrastination. And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons. There's typically 9 or 10 common threads that create or cause or might contribute to the issue of procrastination. And then there's 5 things that we look to that might be helpful in how we would be either addressing it or making other choices or maybe even dealing with it. So let me distinguish the second thing that I wanted to add today. It's sort of a subdivision of procrastinate, and we put it into 2 classifications. There is passive procrastination, to be passively procrastinating, and then active procrastination. And so I'm going to distinguish some examples of how the difference or what the difference might be between a passive procrastination and active procrastination, and then see if this kind of sounds a little bit familiar. Passive procrastination is a good example that I talk about. I mentioned before is the candy wrapper under the seat, right, of the car, or the box in the garage, or the shit that's in the closet that we've been meaning to unpack that since we moved in 6 years ago, right? And it's still there. That's passive. We walk by it. We walk by the stack of stuff on the counter, and we're passively disengaged in procrastinating about whatever that thing is that we're not doing. And that happens in our money. And I'll give some examples of how it shows up in our financial life. Active procrastination is quite a different kettle of fish, if you will. The active procrastination is you actually are engaged in putting something off. A good example is you go to the mailbox and you get the mail. I guess we still do that, right? And then there's a notice from XYZ, whomever, and you immediately set it aside because you're not going to deal with it right now. You probably won't even deal with it today. Been there, done that, right? Active procrastination. Somebody says, maybe your spouse or, a loved one or a friend or whatever says, I need to get, or maybe a boss or a business partner, I need to get X and Y done by today. And you say something to the effect like, follow up with me later, right? And then you don't define later. Now I do that actually, but I give a specific time. Follow up with me Friday because it's already on my note for Friday, and we'll go through it on Friday. Following up later and then leaving later undefined. Later could be, okay, I'll wait a minute, and that's later, right? Or I'll wait a year, and then that would be later. It's like this undefined time that you have actively engaged in, or we have actively engaged in procrastinating and putting off. it's not really avoidance as much as it is a procrastination that's triggered by maybe some other things that are going on. So we have procrastination. That's an issue. Not good, bad. It's just how it works. And then we have the types of procrastination. Generally, there are two types, active and passive. And then depending on what it is and how it affects our financial life, it shows up in our financial life a lot of times in ways that we don't really even understand. But I can give you some good examples. And we've talked about it this month. The auto pay, that's passive procrastination, putting off checking your auto pays every month. Checking the bank statement and the credit card statement to see that you weren't charged for shit. I mean, we had this one thing one time, it was a couple of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, some trip to Paris, right? And we haven't even gone there yet. And so we went through this whole big thing with the credit card company to reverse that charge. And then one time at a hotel, when we were doing a lot of traveling, we had like a movie and a room service show up on our bill, right? We didn't order room service, and we certainly didn't order a movie. But how often do we actually check this stuff, right? And this is sort of how it can show up, because we're putting off actually being engaged, a little bit more involved in the money that's coming in and the money that's going out. And when it shows up in our financial life, it generally is like a drip, drip, drip. And pretty soon you have a bucket of water that you could drown in financially. So let me go over a highlight of some of the 9 things that actually might be some reasons, not reasons, but just triggers that create this symptom of procrastination. And then I'll go back and kind of fill in. I'm putting this together, and we'll be putting it up on the webpage, the Get Started page. And for those that are in the Saturday group, I've got another announcement this morning. I'll have some stuff that we'll be going over on Saturday in the group session, because this is coming up to our last session this week. One of the indicators or contributors to procrastination is that we often get into this situation where we toss aside maybe some self-compassion, and we're demonstrating that we are more stressed during a task or in something that we're putting off. And it's sort of like what I say, chill, give yourself a break, right? Take it easy on yourself. We're probably the hardest critic on ourselves. And there's something, particularly if you're procrastinating about anything financially, there's something that you're avoiding that's a trigger that basically it's like that fight or flight thing that's kicking in. If you just kind of take a chill pill a little bit and give yourself a bit of a break, self-compassion, I think, is sort of the term that we look to, and how that can help you at least identify if that's one of the triggers. One of the big ways that we've adopted procrastination or adapted to it is that we mimic. We followed either role models when we were being reared as children. We have maybe a boss, or maybe a partner, or maybe a spouse, or whatever. And so we end up adopting or adapting through mimicking of others that serve either as role models or people that we look to, and modeling that type of behavior. Another one, and I don't really think that this is a big one, but it does show up sometimes in the financial aspect, and it's sort of that self-doubt or confidence thing that can contribute to triggering procrastination, and that is that we lack the confidence, or maybe we don't think that we're going to be effective at doing the task, or maybe it's something that we haven't done a lot of, or we don't know. I mean, I've talked to people that have been like married for years, And when it comes right down to it, part of the problem is that they just don't know how to balance their checking account, right? That's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it's certainly not working if you have, at the end of the year, $3,400 of NSF fees. I mean, that's like an IRA contribution. And so if you're not effective at a task, maybe you're putting it off because it's a confidence thing. Just ask for help. I mean, that's kind of how it's supposed to work. But if that's something that is triggering why you might be procrastinating on something financial, like we talked about yesterday, pick no more than 3 things. That might be one of the contributors. Also, you might have a bias against a particular task. I think I said something about it yesterday. There's always at least one thing financially that we don't like dealing with. I've got about 2 or 3 that just when that stuff happens every month or whatever, I just don't like dealing with it. I deal with it. And I don't, we all have something like that. And it's really how we frame stuff. So if you have a bias against a particular task financially, or in other aspects of your life, that might be one of the contributing factors that are feeding the energy of procrastination. Another way another contributor could be maybe we're not effective at setting priorities or estimating time that it's going to take for a particular task, like particularly with our financial life. How much time does it take to review our bank statements and our credit card statements and make sure that we've got our receipts and, make sure we just are in touch with our money? Well, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours a month, but if you did a little bit every Saturday or Sunday and set up a routine, it's sort of like eating an elephant. It's a lot easier to eat one fork at a time than trying to just gobble down the whole elephant. So maybe put some perspective to the task at hand and break it down into smaller little tasks if that might be one of the issues that contribute to triggering why you procrastinate in any aspect of your financial life. Time estimates or not setting the priorities and putting things in sort of an order of priority. The other thing is that this one I think is a big thing. For me, it was a big thing. And for a lot of people, it can be a big thing. Procrastination can be triggered because we're focusing more on the immediate gratification and gain today than we are in the future gain. That's sort of that want versus desire. Every time you go for something that you want, you give up something you desire or a part of that. And so that immediate gratification or immediate feedback, if it's not satisfied in a way that we've adopted or adapted to, that can often be a trigger to why we might be procrastinating on stuff financially, right? Also, setting unreasonable expectations is another thing that can trigger why we procrastinate financially. In other words, perfectionism, right? Everything has to be perfect. I used to be the guy that thought everything had to be perfect, and then I realized how imperfect I was, and so I just gave myself a chill pill and relaxed. Is consistent is more important to me, and if it's not working, then generally something about me not being consistent is not being congruent, might be the contributor to why I might be putting stuff off or procrastinating. The next one would be like anxiety. Some things financially actually trigger this feeling of anxiety. And one thing that triggers anxiety for everybody is a notice from the IRS, right? You just get like wound up. And I'm just talking about setting that aside. Normal day-to-day stuff. If you have something and immediately it upsets you and you go off immediately, that's a sign. I can tell you that's not going to work because the impacts, number one, just on your health is significant. You do enough of that over a long period of time, and you make yourself more susceptible to having a heart attack, for God's sake. I mean, it works that way because you're your adrenaline and all those chemicals are rushing in. Sometimes when we just jump into the reaction, it's because it's a trigger, and it's usually never about the thing that it's about. It's always about something more, right? It's always about something more. That's just the trigger that ignited the reaction that you might have had, or that I've had, or that we've had, right? So look to that. If you have that happening, it's a sign that something's not working, and there are techniques that can just in an instant, you can flip that in your favor. I'm all about giving you the edge. I'm all about giving me the edge. And if we can flip things in our favor, I kind of like that. There's another one, and this is probably going to wrap it up in terms of the top contributors. And that's something that we procrastinate financially, is because we feel some discomfort. Maybe we don't have tolerance for it. Maybe we're not, maybe we resent being engaged and having to deal with it. Why should I have to deal with it? Why? They made the mistake. They charged my credit card, blah, blah, blah. Look, would you rather be right, or would you rather be rich? You can be right and I'll be rich. That's kind of what my voice to the world is. Just because you're a hammer doesn't mean everyone and everything's a nail, right? Some shit you just got to let go, and find a way to not be as quick to the trigger in your reaction. And the intolerance is really not intolerance. It's triggering something else that you just don't like about the experience that you're feeling at the time that you're going through this. And then it's better or easier as a coping. It's easier to just put it off and deal with it later. But later never shows up, right? I'll talk to you later. Well, a minute's later, a year is later. When is later, right? We never really define later. And so what happens is we develop these coping mechanisms called procrastination to deal with, but we're not really dealing with anything. We just pull the sheet over our head, and we just pretend like if we don't see it, it's not there. It's just crazy what we do to avoid dealing with it. There's a reason that we don't deal with certain things financially. And if we can be intellectually and emotionally curious about it just a little bit, there's usually a pretty effective way to flip that to your advantage. And it's not about dealing with it. It's really about taking back control of one aspect of your life called your financial life. Now, there's another list that kind of is framed about why do I procrastinate about my XYZ of my money? Or why do I procrastinate about something in my health or whatever? There's probably a couple of common things that are common to all of us, right? I don't think it's unique in terms of any particular demographic profile. I just think it's part of human beings being human, that we've got certain shit that happens that we just put off or procrastinate. Again, I think some of it can be addressed by maybe the fear of perfection and doing things perfect all the time. We put too much pressure, so it's easier to put it off. Maybe we have a good intention but poor execution, right? The world is built with great intentions, but if we don't have good execution, or maybe we don't know the execution strategy that's going to be effective for us, then that can create this disabling quantified effect of where we put stuff off. Another contributor on that side of it is we feel overwhelmed. And the reason, it's a vicious cycle. The reason that we're overwhelmed is because now we got, instead of 3 things that we put off, we've got 33 things that we put off, or we put it off for 33 weeks or 33 months, right? And then all of a sudden we get squeezed into a corner, and that feeling of being overwhelmed takes over. These are triggers that I'm mentioning right now. There's 5 or 6 of these triggers that you want to be aware of, because it's a sign that tells you where you're at in terms of the context of your financial life. and then it gives you the chance to make a different choice in how you're effectively dealing with these things and how they're going to work. A lot of times we have this, what I call the busy bee effect, right? I remember back in the day, I was the busy bee. I had the busy bee. I look busy, but I ain't doing shit, right? I'm moving over here. Shit's flying in the air, folders and notepads, and I get stuff moving on my desk from one side to the other. Just a busy bee. Bzzz. And I ain't doing a damn thing, right? I ain't doing shit. That is a big sign that you want to pay attention to, because the question I would be asking is, what are you avoiding? What is it that you're avoiding dealing with, or procrastinating, putting off dealing with, that you would go to that much energy and be the busy bee and kind of like the hamster on the wheel. Every day gets on the wheel and doesn't go anywhere. Had days like that. I hate that, right? And then the last is distraction. We allow things to distract us. And it's not really that we allow things to distract us. Anything that will get our attention off of having to deal with what we don't want to deal with gets our attention. There's a classic, and I'll get some information for you and put it up there on the page, called the Eisenhower decision matrix. And if you filter through and sort of classify shit in your day, and financially especially, is it urgent or not urgent? First level. And then is it important or non-important? Second level. And then is it something you can do or something you can delegate? Third order. And this matrix gives you a tool that allows you to start just classifying stuff into subgroups that make it a lot easier to break it down into steps, so that you're not necessarily putting it off and procrastinating, and you're dealing with it in a more effective way that you find allows you to make the choice to deal with it and not put it off or procrastinate. I think procrastination is one of the largest contributors to the chaos that we can have or find in our financial life, that keeps us from having the things that we desire. And then we get pissed off and we're bitchy here, and, this person's and blah, 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 spare me, right? It's not about any of that. It's really about what is going on that is triggering that reaction that you don't like, or that is causing discomfort in your financial life, because something is at the core of that. And if we're intellectually and maybe even a little emotionally curious about that, then we can find effective strategies that will allow us to flip that to our advantage and use it to really take back the control and the sense of control over all of our financial aspects of our life, and have, again, it's want or desire. You can't have both. Pick one. If I want this, then I'm going to be giving up some part of what I desire, and that's okay. That's a choice, but understand that's your choice. And if it's better to have the thing for you that you desire, then maybe the shit that you want in the instant, in that moment, maybe it's not that important in the moment. Maybe that instant gratification needs to be maybe rewired a little bit to more realistic, smaller pieces that you can manage. What helped me the most when dealing with this back in the day was I just realized that my routines that were set up in a way that promoted chaos, right? It wasn't that I set out every morning to figure out how I could make my life more chaotic. It just happened to be more chaotic, because that's kind of how I set it up by default. When I became more proactively engaged and started developing different routines that were more effective to be engaged, then the financial crap that I didn't want to deal with, I didn't have to deal with it, because it never became an issue to deal with, right? Some of this stuff happens in an instant. I mean, like in 24 hours, you feel and see a difference. Some of it takes a little bit more time. I think that it's really the commitment that we're looking to. And what we're trying to do with all of these different programs is give you effective tools to do a couple of things. Recognize if shit's not working for you financially, and recognize that you have some choices and some tools that you can make things work for you financially, and then go to work figuring out how that looks and how that works for you. Last point on procrastination is that there is a cost. There's a mental cost because we're distracted. There's probably an emotional cost when we get pissed off, right? There is a health cost when we start rushing all of that anxiety and adrenaline through our system. We tax our body in ways that we might not be typically aware of in the moment, but over time it builds up. It affects our diet. It affects our sleeping pattern. It affects a lot of stuff when we have this anxiety of procrastination, particularly when it's anchored in our financial life. And so it has side effects that can be measured psychologically and physiologically that take a toll. And what I learned is a lot of the stress that I was feeling was really a result of a lot of the shit that I kept putting off and didn't want to deal with it. And most of it was like bullshit excuse. You know, I was making excuses. I mean, that's the bottom line. I didn't want to deal with it because I didn't want to deal with it, and it wasn't complicated. And then I sit there and I look at the outcomes, and you finally get to a point where you just say, that's just absolutely not working. And so when you're feeling that and it's absolutely not working, it's a good part of the reason is how long have we been doing that? So yesterday I talked about pick no more than 3 things financially that you put off or procrastinate. Now take those no more than 3 things and then classify the putting off, the procrastination. Is it active or passive? Are you actively procrastinating, or are you passively procrastinating and putting it off? Classify those 2, because once you have those classified, tomorrow we'll show you a little bit of the next level in how to develop an effective strategy, or a little hack, if you will, that will be able to start flipping that in your favor. You know, one of the most important things that I discovered was that once I gathered everything that made up what I considered or called my financial life, and I actually went through it, what I realized is it wasn't as bad as I thought, right? We always make shit to be bigger than it really is, kind of what I call the boogeyman effect, right? And actually, when you actually put some order to it, most of the anxiety and most of the time that we think it's bigger than it really is because we've been putting it off. And so that's another toll or another cost, if you will, emotional cost that we pay for procrastination. Shit's not that big when we really break it down. And usually when we put it in some sort of order that we can deal with, most of it can be dealt with pretty quickly. But we get so overwhelmed with anxiety about dealing with our financial life. Maybe we didn't have the best role models. I don't know that I had the best, or I don't know I had the worst. I just know that it didn't work, and today it works, and I know why it works. I'm more engaged, and I know when these things show up, and I start procrastinating on something financially. That's a sign. I can instantly identify it, and I know I've got something I can do to make a different choice. Because if I put it off, it's going to cost something. And I think that I'm much more aware of it because we've got employees and partners, and we got a lot of stuff going on. And so you got a different level of awareness. But it's the same thing in a family, and same thing in your house, whether it's you or you got a whole family. Putting stuff off has a cost to everybody around you also. And so what we want to do is figure out, what are a couple of things that we put off? Why do we put them off? And is it active or is it passive in our procrastination, and why we're putting them off? Once we have that framed, Then we can go to work, and I'll start this tomorrow, laying out over the next couple of days effective strategies that allow you to be more effective at dealing with stuff so that you're not feeling like you're putting it off and shit's actually getting done, and you're actually taking back the control of your financial life and making the choices that you really desire. Some of the stuff that you want is cool. But again, it doesn't come without a price, right? You've got to give something up or a part of something that you desire for that instant gratification. And as long as you understand that, generally you'll make choices accordingly, right? It's sort of like, money goes where it's respected and treated well. If we're not going to respect the money and the time well and treat it well, then it's going to go somewhere else, and we're going to waste our time, and then we're going to be out of money. So it's sort of like, the stock market. Investors learn this the hard way. Money in the stock market is going to go to where it is treated best. If you have big gains that you've made on your stock and you haven't taken profit, well, the market will take it back. And so that's kind of how that works, because the whole object is to take the profit, right? That's why you do it. And I think people get confused. And your money can be confusing, but it doesn't have to be. And part of the reason that it can be confusing is maybe we procrastinate and put some of this stuff off. And all we're talking about is maybe just tweaking our relationship with our financial life just a little bit here and a little bit there. If you raised your average 1% a day for 100 days, you'd increase your average 100% over 100 days, right? So just raise your average. I'm average, you're average, we're all average. But I play the game to raise my average a little bit every day. Over the period of a year, I've kind of increased my average a little bit more than the previous year, right? And so just maybe put it in a different context and perspective. All right, so that's a wrap for today, getting started. Now we can move on with the day and start getting shit done. And just as a footnote, we've got the sign up for April. We'll do another Get Started group. If you're already in a group, you can sign up for the April group. Go up to the page right there on the scrolling on the bottom right there, and put your name in. And the first one that we're going to be doing will be April the 3rd. We've got some really cool stuff. And we're going to be getting into a lot more detail about applying the concepts of getting started, maybe with our side gig, maybe getting started with our existing business, maybe getting started with our day trading, maybe getting started with our real estate portfolio or building a real estate. I picked a couple of areas where I think there's a lot of interest and I get a lot of questions about, and I'm going to talk about how getting started works in these areas of financial life. The podcasts that we do Monday through Friday are really about getting ready. The thing that we do on the Saturday is really about getting started. So when we do the one on April 3rd, I'll talk about doing. How do we take from getting ready to getting started to getting doing? And then we get done. And then we do it again, right? So I'll lay that all out on Saturday, April the 3rd. Go to the website, sign up. It'll be good and valid through Friday, the Friday before April 3rd, which is April the 2nd. So it'll be valid up there. If you know somebody who wants to sign up, just send them the link to the page. And it'll be really cool because we've got some really cool, exciting new stuff that we're going to be adding to the program and helping you really start putting this stuff in an order that can give you the edge, right? You ever have anything that you had in your life where you've had an edge and once you had that edge, man, you're good, right? And so that's all we're really doing is trying to give everybody a little bit of an edge so that you can win the game. And the win the game is really defined by the things that you desire in your financial life and building the financial life that you desire. Everybody can do this. Everybody should do this and have the life that they desire financially. But sometimes we need a little help and sometimes we need a little bit of direction to figure out, well, how do we make it work? And so that's what this is all about, figuring out how to make it work. But we got to get ready, then we got to get started, and then we got to get doing shit. And then that's how it works. All right. Have an awesome day. Cheers. Talk to you soon.